However, we have a window within which we have to print a warrant. The Finance Committee left its meeting having said that it would meet the week prior. And the message that we received from the Finance Committee chairman on Monday night was that you would meet a half hour prior on Monday night next week.
Correct.
That doesn't give us time to print a warrant. There's nothing questionable about invoking a bylaw to see to it that the people are properly informed. And the bylaw in question, which I personally don't approve of, if I were writing bylaws, that would not be the bylaw that I would prefer over the one that was adopted in 1920. I think that the original bylaw was far superior to that 2000, the year 2000 substitute that was adopted. However, it is the bylaw. And for this board to meticulously look at the bylaw to make sure that we had the I's dotted and the T's crossed is nothing amiss. We are doing what a town meeting approved and voted, and which was then approved by the Attorney General and is now the law of the town.
And which hasn't been enforced for years. What we're talking about is selective enforcement. Now, I will say to you and the public, the reason why there were actually 4 that we didn't act on. You were there that night. One was because it's the Van Dysen Hall and the committee said we're not ready, so that's off to the future. The reason why we didn't act on the other 3 that relate to the building commissioner's request for money for software, money to reduce the tax rate, and the third one,
land for the
elementary school land, was because we did not have sufficient information at the time to make the decision. Now, Mr. Aguirre is back. As a matter of fact, while he was on vacation, I sent an email thinking he might check it, and he did. And he said, when I get back, I'll be prepared. So he's coming to the meeting prior to town meeting. The elementary school land, nothing really new has come down the pike on that.
Yes,
so
it has.
Not to us.
Yes, it has. We have, this board has gone the extra mile, and we have obtained a provision in the proposed purchase and sale agreement that will overcome your concerns about the contamination of the land. We have an assertion by the seller that they know of no contamination in the land, but also that we have a free hand to go in and have the land tested. So we have taken action to overcome the issues that the Finance Committee had concerning the quality
I
of
will
that.
again state that information was not made public to the Finance Committee until just this minute. So the Finance Committee doesn't have the information.
If you would meet again this week, as you had planned to, you would have the information.
I will also point out to you that there was a question about whether or not we would meet. And also, there was the discussion that there were issues that didn't make the warrant or that would be put off that will be at the next special town meeting. That was part of the discussion. You weren't at that Finance Committee meeting, as I remember. But anyhow.
I'm not a member of the Finance Committee.
Mr. Cronin was there. The public was there.
I'm not a member of the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee is an advisory board to the legislature of the town, and you operate on your own. When we know what the information is that you want, we've gone the extra mile to get it. However,
when are you going to give that to the Finance Committee?
When you meet.
Thank you.
Monday night.
Thank you. You just confirmed
You
what I
said you were
said.
going to meet this week.
We didn't have it.
Well, no,
We didn't meet.
You didn't meet this week.
The other issue, money to reduce the tax rate. A number of the articles that the Selectman recommendation carries, raise and appropriate, the Finance Committee changed to, the ones that the Selectman had marked free cash transfer. The Finance Committee did raise and appropriate. There are certain expenditures that, if approved by voters, you do not pay from free cash. Operating expenses, if you had salaries on it. However, when you raise and appropriate, one of the last things you do, that's why, one of the reasons it's towards the end of the warrant. When you get everything figured out, that's when you say, okay, how much money can we take from free cash to reduce the tax rate? The warrant says $150,000. That's pittance. By going the raise and appropriate route, you get everything properly funded, which are basically budget items. You don't fund budget items from free cash, okay? So when you get that all settled, you know what you're going to raise and appropriate because you've got to be within the levy limit. Then you say, what do we get left in free cash? That's when the Finance Committee says, well, we could take X out of free cash and use it to reduce the tax rate. That's why it's one of the last things that we act on. So until you know everything, all the articles, you don't make a determination on free cash. But that's, in effect, how you reduce the tax rate, okay? So I did post an agenda. We have those articles on there. And I think the only other business is there's a request for a transfer, which is just a normal business item. So the Finance Committee will meet at 6:30 on the 21st at the middle school prior to town meeting to act on the 3 articles. And we will get the information relative to the purchase of the land at the elementary school and what you heard tonight.
Now, at the meeting, will you be able to speak up at the beginning and say...
It's a regular Finance Committee meeting.
But I mean, at the actual town meeting, will you be able to speak up before the voters and let them know...
The discussion, that's when you stand up and ask questions, make comments, whatever, yes.
This way you'll be able to tell what happened in this situation.
Yes, yes. So for these 3 articles, whatever the Selectmen recommended is what will be on the warrant, is what they're saying. What is on the warrant is not necessarily what the Finance Committee will actually recommend.
But you'll be able to state what you recommend. It won't be on the paper, but at least you'll be able to, okay.
Yes, yes. So even though, and by the same token, if the Finance Committee voted to make a certain recommendation, let's say they decided it was raise and appropriate at the meeting on September the 1st, and we go to town meeting, and somewhere in the meantime, prior to us meeting that night, we find out, you know what, that shouldn't be raised and appropriate, that should be free cash. At the meeting that the Finance Committee will hold, it can change the vote, and then go into town meeting and say, we want to advise the people what we originally said was raised and appropriate. We've changed that, we voted tonight to make that free cash transfer, or whatever the source of funding may be, just in case there would be whether it be a grant or some other available funding. That's why the warrant is worded that way, raise and appropriate and/or transfer from certified free cash. I know that you have deadlines for the warrants. That's nothing new. We've had to deal with that time and warrant. The question I have relative to
this warrant and the process by which it was produced. Some. I want to say the tradition is that the Selectman put forward or the department that wants a spending proposition puts forward a proposition, and in that proposition we exert the leadership to say raise and appropriate, which means it's added to the tax rate, or transfer from free cash if free cash is available, and it is in the category of items that we do not ordinarily transfer, add to the tax rate if we can transfer free cash. The things that we ordinarily do not add to the tax rate are one-time expenses that will not become part of an operating budget in future years, or that are not customarily part of an operating budget. But some of these items that the Finance Committee came back with the discretion that we allowed them by wording the articles permissively, instead of putting our dime down in the article and saying free cash, or or raise and appropriate. We said and/or so that the finance committee could weigh in. Some of these articles that the finance committee want added to, have recommended be added to the tax rate are in the category which in our judgment does not traditionally warrant an addition to the tax rate when free cash is available.
And had you been at the finance committee meeting on the 1st and...
I don't say that again. It's not incumbent upon a selectman to be there. Our job
May I
is
finish the statement? I let
our
you talk.
job
I
is
only
to
asked
draw
that
up
you
this
offer the
warrant,
same courtesy
and we've
to
done
me.
it. Don't fault a member of the Board of Selectmen for not being a member of the Finance Committee. You know that they're two distinct
And
committees.
you know I didn't do that. I'm talking about attendance at an open public meeting, as people sitting in this room right now who attended know what I'm talking about. What
Are
I'm
you
gonna
running
say
against
is
this
that-
board?
No, no.
I believe you are.
Mr. Menchie, repeatedly this board has allowed me to provide services to the town, to this board.
You're
and
attacking
else.
the board of which you want to be a
No, I'm
member.
trying to explain something. I have a question about the warrant. May I ask
You're
a
not
question
running
about
for the board,
warrant?
Mrs. Gulak. You're running against it.
May I ask a question about the warrant, Mr. Chairman? Okay. The warrant that's posted out there on the board doesn't appear to be the same warrant that was in the Gazette, and I'm just wondering what happened between the two postings. I thought they were identical, and I looked at the Gazette and I noticed there were some differences, so I was just wondering why that was.
What is the question again, please?
There's a warrant posted out there on the public posting board, out here in the foyer. And there was I'll call it an advertisement, a legal ad in the Gazette that had the warrant.
Article 2, Section 3 of the town bylaws expressly requires that the newspaper print a warrant with finance committee recommendations. When we posted the first warrant on August 13th, which you had to have in order to have a warrant to act upon, there were no finance committee recommendations.
Because we met September 1st.
We posted that warrant on August 13th without any finance committee recommendations. And that is the natural course of events. You have to have that warrant in order to be able to act on the financial articles. On August 13th, we posted it without recommendations. The bylaw expressly requires that the newspaper publication be with finance committee recommendations. And that is the difference between the two versions.
Well, the difference is that there are both selectmen and finance committee recommendations on the printed warrant in the paper. That's what my question is. I've never seen that before.
No. There's no difference. All we did was to clarify. On this original draft warrant, on the original warrant, we have in the middle column the site, the fund site that the selectmen put forward with the article, transfer from free cash. In the cases where you changed it to raise and appropriate, to raise the tax rate, we made it clear that this transfer from free cash is selectmen suggest. But over here we put finance committee recommends raise and appropriate. But this did not change at all. Our transfer from free cash is still there, as it was on the warrant that was posted on August 13th.
What I just said was, I have not seen a warrant posted that carried both recommendations, and I was wondering why. Whether you call yours not a recommendation but a suggestion, I'm just asking why.
The
Now,
warrant,
as far as the levy limit goes, as far as items that would be, that you might suggest were free
the
cash,
levy limit's not involved.
and the FinCom said raise and appropriate. My personal opinion, I'm not speaking for the committee, $150,000 is not enough money to put in there to reduce the tax rate. Any item that the Finance Committee put down as raise and appropriate that you suggested be transfer from free cash can be covered in the article that says reduce the tax rate by X. I don't know what the amount is going to be. But in effect, when you have it as a raise and appropriate, you are within the levy limit.
The
But
total
then
that
you
you
offset it
recommended
with
be
the
added
cash
to
from
the
the,
tax rate,
free cash.
the total that you recommended be added to the tax rate, I believe, I could be mistaken, I don't memorize these figures when I'm drinking my breakfast coffee, but it's approximately $59,000, which would make the amount of the tax rate reduction in effect $209,000.
Unless the finance committee decides to put a higher amount in there, and that's what I'm saying, we haven't discussed that number. My own personal opinion is 150 is too low, but I'm not speaking for the finance committee when I say that. That's why that's one of the ones that we have to act on.
With everything that was, with everything that was done, when all of the figures were
Divvied up.
put in their proper places, we had about $232,000 left in free cash.
Mhm,
That's as low as we cared to go.
mhm.
And therefore, when we put forward the article, which is our responsibility, when we wrote the article, we put in what we thought was as high a prudent number to cut taxes out of free cash as possible,
Mhm.
which was $150,000. But it was in anticipation that $60,000 worth of other articles that the Finance Committee converted to raise and appropriate were going to be free cash.
And that's why I just explained to you about raise and appropriate within the levy limit and then using a higher number, potentially, to reduce the tax rate, so that those expenses fall within what can be appropriated under the levy limit. So, yes, when the finance committee looks at that whole package, and I'm talking the package that starts July 1st and will be summarized when we have our last town meeting that will affect the tax rate. You have to look at the entire package so that we look at the number, what's left in the levy limit, what's left in free cash. As of the meeting we had on September the 1st, and I also don't have the exact number in front of me, we did have money left in the levy limit. We were not up there. But I believe the number that I got from the FinCom member that tracks the money as we're going through it, I don't do that, I do the minutes, but he's tracking that. I think we still got about $900,000 in free cash. Now, one of the things we recommended was, different from what you had, was the OPEB account. $400,000 was requested. That was discussed, and the decision was $275,000, and that's based on the auditor's recommendation on where the town should be at this given point in time, based on everything they looked at, where we should be with OPEB. So $275,000 will bring us to where we need to be. So that freed up money in free cash right there. All right, so each one of those things that's changed, all right, does affect the levy limit, it affects free cash. But again, a very important article that you're telling us that obviously the moderator will ask for discussion, so the finance committee can speak up. But the amount of money that should be in the amount recommended to reduce taxes, I mean, to not allow that, I think is just wrong. Whatever we can determine is an allowable amount to reduce the tax burden is what should be voted on. But
What do
again,
you
that's
think
what
it
I'm
should be, Mrs. Goulart?
I would have to look at the rest of the articles. I'm guessing numbers right now. I know we're in the levy limit, and I know free cash was around $900,000 when we finished the meeting, okay? We did okay the $500,000 for the capital account. The big one I remember was the OPEB account, okay? But again, when I talk about the $150,000 not being enough, that's personal opinion. I have not discussed that with any committee members. All I'm saying is, that's an important article that the Finance Committee should be able to make a recommendation for a higher amount.
With the prior year's free cash, I don't know what the balance was, but I know that the balance of the $1,700,000 that this year, after all of the free cash obligations of the warrant that we proposed, would have been $230-some thousand.
Mhm.
And as far as OPEB is concerned, and that's, if there were $900,000 left in free cash with the free cash from prior years or whatever, I know nothing about that. As far as OPEB is concerned, the town treasurer herself submitted an article for $400,000 to be deposited in the OPEB account.
Yes.
We have a report from the Roselli auditing firm that indicates that because of the age of our workforce, the town is faced in less than 10 years, probably 7 years now, in view of the fact that it's been some time since he made his prediction, of an annual unfunded liability for post-employment retiree health benefits of $3 million a year.
Mhm.
We don't always have $1 million in free cash to transfer into the OPEB account.
Never have had.
If we have $400,000 to put in that account, God bless it, because if we don't, when it comes due, that's going on the tax rate for our children. What we banked, what we proposed in this warrant be banked, and that's part of it. And there was also the $400,000, let me finish with that first. The $400,000 was in an article that the treasurer submitted. We did not change it, and in the finished warrant, you're talking about not changing the warrant, we didn't alter the warrant. It still says it has $400,000 transferred from free cash, which is what we recommend. Both boards agreed that that should be a free cash transfer. And it says in the right-hand column, $275,000 recommended by the Finance Committee. We also recommended that $500,000 go to a municipal capital stabilization fund.
Yes, from free cash.
That's $900,000 invested in the town's future, and which will prevent a calamitous rise in the taxes in the future. $500,000 in a capital stabilization account will get the town better terms when we have to borrow for such things as adding to the elementary school, which is foreseeable within the next couple of years.
No disagreement on 500,000.
Well,
The 500,000 in OPEB, there was discussion with the treasurer, and that's when the audit was brought into, or I should say the recommendations of the auditor were brought into it. At the meeting, town accountant was there, this was discussed, and the 275 was felt would bring us to where the auditor says we have to be. Now, one of the other important points about OPEB, and there is legislation either proposed or pending to address this issue. We've discussed this at MMA repeatedly. There's a meeting coming up in October, the legislative breakfast meeting. That's usually